Hey, Bossing Up Overcoming OCD listeners. Thanks again for being here today for an episode where I'm going to be talking with Lauren, who is a practitioner that uses tapping to help with anxiety. In this episode, you're going to hear about her experience in overcoming anxiety through tapping, and she's going to talk about why this is so important if you're dealing with chronic pain, chest tightness, upset stomach, feeling overwhelmed, or on the edge of a nervous breakdown. And if you're looking to discover the 5 biggest mistakes that fuel relationship anxiety, check out my Overthinker's Guide to Love. In this free email course, you're going to discover those big no-nos that fuel the anxiety spiral, as well as tips on how to break the cycle. You can grab the Overthinker's Guide to Love at livebeyonddoubt.com/overthinkers guide to love. And if you know someone who would benefit from this episode, please send it their way. Now, let's get back into the conversation. Awesome. Lauren, thank you so much for being here. So, Lauren, tell the audience, if you would, a little bit about you and your specialty and how it relates to OCD.
Yeah, so I am an EFT trainer and
Mhm.
practitioner and coach. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and it is a process of gently tapping on certain parts of the body while
Yes.
simultaneously acknowledging how you are feeling. And it is a beautiful and gentle way of holding space for your emotions. We all have experiences and things that happen in our lives that have emotions attached to them that are uncomfortable. Oftentimes, we don't enjoy feeling those and we shove them down and distract ourselves so we don't have to feel those things. Yeah. And over time, that stuff builds up and it builds up until it's going to come out in some way. And sometimes that can show up as physical pain in the body. Sometimes that can show up as a breakdown, and tapping can help you move through that. It doesn't have to get to that point where you're really feeling super overwhelmed and having that breakdown. With OCD, I know that there can also be anxiety that goes with that, stress and overwhelm. And so
Yes.
tapping can be a really wonderful tool that can, when you recognize those things are starting to happen and it's starting to feel really intense, tapping can be a great tool to implement to help to ground you and calm you in the moment.
Awesome. What led you into the tapping and the EFT work?
Yeah, so I came to do this work because of my own journey with anxiety and stress and trying to find a holistic way of managing it. And
Yes.
I was introduced to it in a group setting. I felt calmer in my body and I was very intrigued by that. And so that led me to have some one on one sessions, continue practicing myself, working with a practitioner. And I just kept doing it until I went on to get certified so I could share it with others as a practitioner. And then I kept going with my training. So now I'm a trainer, so I can certify other people to become EFT practitioners through EFT International.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really amazing that you had that experience that helped you with your anxiety because a lot of OCD sufferers, they steer away from medicine if they can, and I'm sure you can imagine because of the health anxiety. I mean, OCD thrives off of possibilities,
Mhm.
and so if there's a possibility of having an awful side effect, they're not wanting to take the medicine at all, even if it's like a minimal chance.
There are amazing benefits to it, though. I will just say this, if you are someone who has knowingly experienced trauma, I would advise you to work with a practitioner as opposed to just trying to dive in and do this work on your own. Having somebody to guide you through it can be really helpful, just so that you don't go too deep too fast and, exacerbate the stress and the anxiety.
Yes. So what you're saying is if you've had some serious stuff happen to you in your life, you need a therapist, practitioner, someone to help you. Basically, you don't overdo it, overextend your emotional capacity.
You could definitely try it out on your own, and I would just not advise going into tapping on trauma that has happened to you in the past without really having some understanding of how this works and having some guidance. You could absolutely tap on feeling anxious about giving a presentation at work or something like that, but just a lot of the time, The way that tapping works, we can tap on something that's really present in our lives now. So, like I just said, this anxiety about giving a presentation, right? Other memories can begin to make their way to the surface. And you might not think that has anything to do with why you're feeling anxious. Because in your head, you're like, I'm feeling anxious because I have this project, which is valid and true. However, there are likely other things that have happened in your past that have not been processed that can be related to that. And so
Yes.
that process of unveiling what's there, sometimes that can bring things up that you weren't necessarily expecting, that sort of thing. And I mean, that's the beauty of this work is that it leads you where you need to go. But if you are someone that has experienced trauma, yeah, just do yourself a favor and do it with a practitioner.
Yes. Have you ever come across someone who has a phobia and they use tapping to help them with that phobia?
I have worked with people with a variety of different phobias. I've worked with people that have a fear of driving over bridges. I've worked with
Yes.
a woman who had a fear of going in an elevator. And sometimes when we have those fears, there is a direct correlation with something specific that has happened in the past. And
Right.
that's why the fear manifested. But sometimes there's not. And in both of these situations, there was not a specific trigger event that they were aware of. It just is something that kind of built over time to a point where it was really impacting their day-to-day life. And so tapping can really help. And in both of those instances, in working with them, the woman who had the fear of going in the elevator, by the time we worked together for 8 weeks, and by the end of that time together, she was able to go on a vacation and she went on every single elevator that was in her path. And it really changed her life because it had been holding her back from taking specific vacations and doing certain things and going to Manhattan because she was
Yes.
unable to go in certain buildings, really any building there. Yeah. So it's about figuring out what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me more about what happened with this elevator lady.
So first we started off with tapping about this fear of being in the elevator. We tapped about what happened and how she felt when she would go into an elevator. And she would get really hot and really sweaty, and her heart would start racing, right? She felt like she was having a panic attack. So that's what led her to come to me. She had tried lots of different things to try and mitigate this. She never really liked elevators, but as she got older, this fear just amplified and amplified to the point where she felt like it's affecting her relationship, unable to go on, vacations that her partner wanted to go on.
Yes.
Then we started with like the physical of what happened to her. We started tapping on questions like, does it remind you of anything? And all of these different things. And eventually this thought of like, well, I don't think this is related, but this kind of popped up. And it was the memory of when she wasn't even in an enclosed space or anything like that, but she felt like she was in a situation where she felt like she was trapped. After we tapped, there was a big kind of like that aha moment of, okay, like this is where this was stemming from.
Yes. So just giving her a little bit more clarity around where the fear was coming from and maybe rationalizing or kind of resolving it emotionally just from the tapping. That's what happened.
Yeah, that you can also do a lot of tapping for your inner child, right?
Oh,
She was very young and tapping on how she felt then, how she was very scared, how she felt out of control, right? So kind of sending love to that former version of herself, that younger version of herself, letting that younger version of herself know that like adult me is here now to help you through this. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm sorry that had to go that you did go through this and I'm here with you now. That sort of thing, kind of like parenting your inner child was some of the work that we did too. It can yeah, we tapped on lots of different things, but she can do it without taking medication now and
mm,
she can do it without having a panic attack. And that's huge.
powerful. And so, Lauren, which parts of the body are you tapping?
Tapping protocol, when I explain this, I often compare it to acupuncture because the points that we're tapping on, we're applying acupressure to. Just like when you would go to acupuncture, they would take those tiny needles and put them in at certain points. There are lots of points on the body, but we start on the pinky side of the hand,
Mhm.
and you can do either hand. It doesn't matter. There's no wrong way of doing this. I always like to tell people that. Then we go to the top of the head, the crown of the head. You can use your fingertips or you can use the palm and tap on the head, two hands or one, whatever feels best. Then we go to the start of the eyebrows. Then we go to the sides of the eyes. So as we're tapping on these points, you can notice if perhaps you tap on these points or touch these points naturally during the day. The side of the eye point is a common one. If you're feeling stressed, you might come and just, rub your temples, that sort of thing.
Right.
Under the nose, onto the chin crease. So this is one sometimes when you're like just like thinking, you'll just like tend to tap there, right?
So some of these are natural spots that we
Right.
tend to touch.
Yeah. Then underneath the collarbone on both sides. So you can use two hands or you can use one. That's like a common spot. I often find myself naturally just kind of touching my chest like that. And then under the arm. So for women, it's about the center of the bra strap on the side of the body. And for men, it's about 2.5, 3 inches down from the armpit. And then the last point is between the pinky and the ring finger on the back of the hand. And that's it. That's the main points of the protocol.
Seems like by doing the tapping, it helps relax the brain so that you can more easily process this emotional stuff.
Yeah, so you definitely are calming the body because when you're tapping on these points, it's sending a message to the brain to reduce the amount of cortisol that's being produced. So,
Nice.
yeah, so cortisol is that stress hormone. Just knowing that if you're feeling really stressed or overwhelmed and you tap on that point and you take a few deep breaths, it's going to help to reduce that cortisol, which can be really powerful in the moment.
Yes. And are there any mantras or affirmations that you're saying while you're doing the tapping?
Yes. So that's the second part of this is putting words to how you're feeling. So if you're feeling really anxious, you would be saying something on the side of the hand. Would say something like, even though I'm feeling really anxious, I love, honor, and accept myself. And you would say that statement 3 times or a version of that statement. You can always change the second half of the statement. We call that the balancing part of the statement. Some people struggle with saying, I love and accept myself. So you could always just say, even though I'm feeling really anxious, that's just how it is today, right? You can say something that just really, really true to you. And then when you tap on the rest of the points, so you move to the top of the head and you would say, I'm really anxious. Then come to the eyebrows. I'm so anxious today. On the side of the eye, I'm feeling all this anxiety in my body, right? We're just focusing on the how we are actually feeling. And some people will say, but we're saying the negative thing over and over again. Like, are we tapping in the bad thing? No, we are not tapping in the bad thing. We are holding space for how we are actually feeling because we spend so much time trying to avoid how we are really feeling
Yes.
that it's important to put words to how we're feeling and hold space for it, and then we can begin to move through that emotion, and the intention is to always, feel a little lighter, feel better as we move through tapping. It's like as you continue to tap and you're talking about all this anxiety, maybe a thought comes up like, I'm really anxious, but I've gotten through this before and I'll get through it again, right? Something a little bit more positive naturally comes through. And so you change the words as you move through and you see where it leads you, or you see what thoughts come up, or if a memory comes up, and then you can tap on that.
Yes. And Lauren, it seems like this technique is very similar to exposure response prevention, the gold standard treatment for OCD. But in exposure response prevention, the client is exposed to their fear and they remain in that fear until the anxiety comes down and they're not allowed to do any compulsions. While this is like tapping and sometimes tapping is a compulsion, this is like a healthy redirection and a way to tolerate the anxiety without being so overwhelmed. But I mean, there is ways in a hierarchy of helping them get into the exposures, but I really like this idea as a way to help soften the experience with exposures.
Yeah. And the thing with tapping is that we always want to do it in a way that feels safe to you. So
Yeah.
you never have to, dive in and start talking about the traumatic thing that happened to you.
In general, I guess if I don't know how you want to quantify it, but how successful are people when they come into the tapping space, like from start to finish? Like, what does that success or results look like for them?
Yeah, I mean, it varies from person to person, what their goals are, sometimes somebody comes to me and they're just feeling incredibly overwhelmed and they don't have other words for it than just like feeling overwhelmed and they want to feel better, right? And so we'll set the goal of feeling better and tapping and talking about what's going on in their lives and processing some of these things. Other people have a specific fear and they want to be able to drive across the bridge. And so I have been blessed to witness some miraculous transformations. And I love this work so much.
Awesome. And Lauren, where can the audience connect with you?
Yeah. So you can find me at mindshiftwithlauren.com. And if you look up Mindshift with Lauren on Instagram, I'll be there too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.